Historia Japonii i atomu jest, delikatnie mówiąc, naznaczona piętnem. W 1945 roku świat był świadkiem niewyobrażalnego zniszczenia Hiroshimy i Nagasaki, które na zawsze zmieniło bieg historii ludzkości. Cienie tamtych wybuchów pozostawiły niezatarty ślad na narodzie japońskim, stanowiąc dobitne świadectwo niszczycielskiej mocy atomu. Jednakże w dekadach, które nastąpiły po tej najczarniejszej, Japonia dokonała niezwykłego zwrotu. W latach 60. naród powstawał z popiołów, przyjmując za sojusznika siłę, która wcześniej rzuciła go na kolana. Energia jądrowa stała się symbolem postępu i innowacji, napędzając szybki rozwój przemysłowy Japonii i zaspokajając jej aspiracje do lepszej przyszłości. Ale ten związek z atomem, oznaczony zarówno zniszczeniem, jak i tworzeniem, miał nabrać przerażającego obrotu. Katastrofa w Fukushimie w 2011 roku ponownie otworzyła stare rany i wzbudziła nowe, uzasadnione obawy. Zgłębmy dziś zatem tę skomplikowaną sagę, badając dychotomię nadziei i horroru, która definiuje japońskie dziedzictwo jądrowe.
Still in Japan, new record high levels of radiation have been found underground
Wybucha wodór na skutek rozłożenia się wody na tlen wodoru.
Functions are occurring at the power plant near Tokyo and a facility in Onagawa. Essentially, the reactors have lost the capability of pumping cooling water into the core.
Nach Japan auf die Explosion im Atomkraftwerk Fukushima.
Mauvaise nouvelle en provenance de la centrale nucléaire japonaise de Fukushima. De la fumée s'est élevée ce lundi du réacteur numéro 3 et des employés ont reçu un ordre d'évacuation ce lundi matin.
Zbliżając się do prefektury Fukushima, zaczynamy zauważać coś dziwnego, pojawiającego się obok lub nad pasami autostrady. Dozymetry. Pojawiają się one wcześniej niż jakiekolwiek znaki drogowe wskazujące na zniszczone miasta wokół problematycznej elektrowni jądrowej, a nawet na długo przed tym, jak za horyzontem wyłonią się kominy siostrzanej elektrowni Fukushimie Daiichi. Dozymetry te zostały zainstalowane tutaj po katastrofie w 2011 roku, nie tylko po to, aby pomóc monitorować poziom promieniowania, ale także aby uspokoić ludzi co do względnego bezpieczeństwa większości obszaru dotkniętego katastrofą. Ich starzejący się wygląd sugeruje jednak, że pozostaną tutaj na długo. Wartości milisiewertów na godzinę rosnące stopniowo biorą tutaj pierwszeństwo nad kilometrami w mierzeniu tego, jak blisko miejsca zero się znajdujemy. I choć nie są one martwiąco wysokie, w obrębie 10-kilometrowego promienia od uszkodzonej elektrowni osiągają górne wartości 1 milisiewerta na godzinę. W Polsce nasza średnia ekspozycja na promieniowanie z naturalnych źródeł wynosi około 2,5 milisiewerta na rok. Tutaj taką dawkę otrzymam w mniej niż 2 godziny. Mimo tego jest to nadal całkowicie bezpieczne, ponieważ te ilości promieniowania nie są niczym, czym warto się przejmować, są wciąż niskie. Daje to pewne spojrzenie na to, dlaczego większość ludzi, którzy ewakuowali się z tego obszaru w 2011 roku, mimo wszystko nie chce tutaj wrócić. Pamiętajmy jednak, że to prawdopodobnie tylko jeden z wielu powodów, o których więcej opowiem w dalszej części tego filmu. Ponieważ obszar katastrofy nie jest tak naprawdę blisko Tokio, przyjazd tutaj ma sens tylko wtedy, gdy towarzyszyć będzie mu nocleg. Jednym z najdogodniejszych miejsc, gdzie można się zatrzymać, jest Futaba, gdzie w trakcie prac nad zabezpieczeniem elektrowni otwarto jeden hotel, który to teraz również poza pracownikami obsługuje także przyjezdnych tutaj dla, nazwijmy to, doświadczenia. Hotel ten znajduje się mniej niż 5 km od zniszczonej elektrowni w linii prostej, a jednocześnie i w nadbrzeżnej części Futaby, gminy, która była ostatnią, którą otwarto na ponowne zasiedlenie. Mieszkańcom pozwalano wjeżdżać do północno-wschodniej części Futaby ale tylko przejściowo już wcześniej, od marca 2020 roku, a nakaz ewakuacji został tutaj ostatecznie zniesiony w 2022 roku. W tym samym czasie pociągi zaczęły ponownie zatrzymywać się na lokalnej stacji, raz jeszcze łącząc ją z resztą Japonii. Przed katastrofą w Futabie mieszkało blisko 7 000 osób. Dziś tylko około 100 z nich zdecydowało się osiedlić lub powrócić do miasta, co czyni go najprawdopodobniej jednym z najcichszych miejsc, w których można mieszkać w tej wielkiej prefekturze. Jeden z powracających mieszkańców, którego spotkaliśmy, założył tutaj własny biznes, który koncentruje się na organizowaniu wycieczek z przewodnikiem po mieście, pokazując jego przeszłość i drogę do odbudowy. Opowiadam historię o tym, jak Futaba powoli wraca do życia, z niedawnymi dodatkami, takimi jak urząd pocztowy czy nadchodząca pralnia, które mają być głównymi przykładami tego właśnie powrotu do normalności. Nie mogą jednak ukryć one faktu, że miasto jest stopniowo wyburzane, aby przygotować miejsce na nowe domy, jeżeli kiedykolwiek ktoś jeszcze zdecyduje się tutaj osiedlić. Spacerując po pustych chodnikach, dostrzega się znaki dawnego życia, porzucone w mgnieniu oka. Opuszczone szkoły, sklepy, salony samochodowe, basen publiczny czy ośrodek młodzieżowy można sobie niemal wyobrazić zgiełk tej małej społeczności, która ucichła nagle w 2011 roku. Jedynym hałasem, który przerywa tutejszą wszechobecną ciszę, jest huk licznych ciężarówek wywożących radioaktywną wierzchnią warstwę gleby i resztki budynków z trwających wyburzeń do miejsc ich tymczasowego składowania w ramach przygotowań do dalszego ich spalenia. Taka, w telegraficznym skrócie, jest Futaba w 2024 roku. To samo powiedzieć można o wielu innych miastach, które zostały ewakuowane po trzęsieniu ziemi w 2011 roku, następującego po nim tsunami i spowodowanej przez nie katastrofy nuklearnej. Ich odbudowa, choć oczywiście możliwa, wygląda jednak bardziej na idealistyczne marzenie niż na rzeczywistość.
Now, the visit to the plant that we took back in April of this year was a very special one, I would say. First of all, it is not possible to just stroll in and say, hey, I want to see the site of the world's second or first, depending on how you look at it, worst nuclear disaster. You have to go through a whole process, and of course the easiest one is to work with a company that actually arranges for these so-called tours to be done, because technically it's not really a tour, it's a study visit. So first of all, when you get to Fukushima, the area around the power plant, you'll be taken to the TEPCO Archives Decommissioning Center. So in that center, you'll be told the whole story of Fukushima, and it's a very sombering experience to say the least. First of all, you'll be one of the few people in there, as the study tours are not made with large groups in mind. It'll be probably around 10 to 15 people max. And first of all, you'll be shown a video which is very Japanese in many ways, as you will be essentially seeing TEPCO representatives saying sorry over and over again for what has happened here in 2011 and for the consequences that all of the world is suffering as a result of the earthquake, the tsunami, and the ensuing nuclear disaster. After you see the video, that's where the most interesting part of the entire experience begins, because first of all, you'll be left to essentially get ready for entering the power plant, which requires you to leave all of your personal belongings right there on site. To give you an idea, you'll essentially be leaving all your phones, watches, pretty much anything that has any electronics in it, in a building 15 kilometers away from the nuclear power plant before you actually get there. The reasons are obvious. First of all, Fukushima Daiichi is still a nuclear power plant in every respect. It's a site that is loaded with nuclear fuel, some of which is molten down, and also it's full of nuclear radioactive debris. So as a result, first of all, because of the threat of possible terrorism, you can easily, they say, think that you can make a dirty bomb out of the things that you can find in Fukushima Daiichi. It's just not acceptable to take any electronics that can take photos, record video, audio, anything with you for the safety of the workers and essentially of the entire population. So you'll be entering Fukushima Daiichi without absolutely anything. And then, as soon as you do that, you leave. and you leave with an envelope of things which I'd be more than happy to show you, essentially to see what's the site like today in 2024. Now, as I just said, you get an envelope of things when you visit the commissioning center, the archives. And first of all, the first thing you see is a map that shows you where you're going to go from these archives. And well, it gives you a rough overview of how big the evacuation area is. So during the disaster, the nuclear disaster that ensued after the tsunami, more than 100,000 people have been evacuated from the entire area around the nuclear power plant, of course, in concern for their safety. Because obviously, a lot of nuclear fallout has been blown away by the wind in a very specific direction, and this direction of the mountains in the upper part of the Fukushima prefecture. So when you take a look at the map, you'll easily see that these areas are still mostly off limits, which is quite confusing when you think that Futaba, the place where I was staying, is the closest to the nuclear power plant. So when it comes to the actual cities, the municipalities that exist, because it's, as I said, less than 5 kilometers away. And you can return to it, but not to the areas in the upper mountains. Eventually, along the way, you'll be passing through many forests, and these forests will not be decontaminated, as pretty much the only way to decontaminate the forest would be to cut it all down and burn the soil in it to get rid of any radioactive isotopes, which of course is not going to happen. So Fukushima Daiichi surroundings, the forest, of which there are many, will essentially be left as is, and you won't be able to enter them, at least anytime soon. And there's actually really no plan for what to do with them. But they'll be the things you'll be passing through the most. And when you have your personal dosimeter, which is the only piece of electronic equipment that you can take with you, you'll hear that a lot of that area was not decontaminated and won't be decontaminated, as I said, anytime soon. You'll hear a lot of clicking and a lot of worrying noises if you are worried by your personal dosimeter, which you can set to whichever level you want. Now, the entry into the Fukushima Daiichi power plant is going to be assisted if you go there by a couple of people. We had 4 representatives of TEPCO. And TEPCO, for those of you who don't know, but it's probably really difficult not know, is the company that was operating the nuclear power plant. After the power plants were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Japan, they have been built and operated by private companies, essentially across the entire country. But today, TEPCO has been mostly nationalized. More than 50% of shares are owned by the state through a fund set up for the decommissioning of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The reason, of course, is first of all, it would be financially impossible, non-viable for TEPCO to handle the cost of the decontamination and decommissioning of the plant alone. Quite obviously, it's an extremely expensive process. We're talking about trillions of dollars in the end to get everything cleaned up. So that's one reason. And second reason is for the government to have oversight over a company and over their site when the company has failed. Because obviously a lot of the wrongdoings in Fukushima are a result of TEPCO not doing the right thing, or ignoring, for example, the fact that there is a huge possibility of a large earthquake that will cause a tsunami that will overwhelm the defenses of the nuclear power plant in question. TEPCO essentially just ignored them for many, many years. And that's why we probably are where we are today with Fukushima Daiichi. But back to the plant. With these 4 employees, the first stage, and that's, I would say, a very interesting experience to say the least, you'll have to enter the power plant. So you will go through a security checkpoint, and the security checkpoint will be a place where you'll pick up your badge and, the most importantly, your personal dosimeter. You'll also be passing through radiation check gates to see if you have any contaminants on your shoes and your hands at the moment when you enter. You'll be going through the same process, but backwards when you're leaving the plant. It's arduous, it's long, it takes its time, but well, it's necessary. And then straight from there, you head for a briefing, and that's where the most important part of the visit begins. Of course, needless to say, you cannot walk through Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant alone. You cannot actually walk through it at all. Walking is out of the question because of the fact that it's A, live nuclear facility, as I said, and also B, because it is somewhat contaminated still. But interestingly, we've been told that over 90% of the nuclear power plant, not the entire site, is actually cleaned up already, and it is a place where in more than 90% of the site, you don't need a hazmat suit anymore to walk through it and to operate in it. So since no hazmat suits are necessitated by the requirements of the site, all you need to have on yourself at all times is a small high visibility vest. And on top of that small high visibility vest, you have your personal dosimeter, which is set to an exceptionally low value. I cannot recall the exact number at the moment, but it's a safe value that you'll most likely exceed during your visit, which I'll tell you about in a second. And then from there, you head onto a bus. And actually, that was very interesting. It was a brand new bus, so you can see that there's a lot of focus in Fukushima Daiichi about cleaning, about keeping the equipment new and functioning, just to maintain that famous Japanese efficiency in the cleanup efforts. And on that bus, you just essentially be able to smell the fact that it's extremely new and it only operates within that plant. And you can also imagine that given the fact it's a nuclear facility, that's where it will probably end its life as well. But that's a digression on my end. With the bus, you'll first be taken, and very slowly, I must say, you're driving at around 5 to 10 kilometers per hour. For many reasons, most likely. First of all, security. There's a lot of people walking on the premises, doing things, because it's very much a live site. Thousands of people still work in Fukushima, and interestingly enough, less people worked at Fukushima Daiichi prior to the accident than there are working there now. So you can see nuclear disasters economically not very viable. So the bus is very slow to get to its prime first location, and the first location is Unit 1. And now, I must say that this was probably the most surreal experience in my entire life, approaching Unit 1. Because essentially you're seeing from the bus through the front windshield, Unit 1 as was in March of 2011. Unit 1 hasn't been covered up yet. There is still a large gaping hole, and you can see the internal workings of the containment building just largely exposed. And the first thought that comes to your mind is this safe? Well, it is safe. You wouldn't be brought here if it wasn't, but it's still a sight to behold, I would say, and something that stops your heart for a second, especially if you have been interested in Fukushima Daiichi for many, many years, as I have been, because I've seen countless photos of this place, and now, yet, I'm slowly approaching it, meter by meter, just to get out in front of it and look at it in the flesh. So, because that's the next part of the trip. Now, TEPCO has built a viewing platform in front of all the four main nuclear reactors at Fukushima, the ones that suffered accidents. As I'll show you in a moment, I'll blow this up on the screen for you. You're standing less than 100 meters away as a group from the nuclear reactors, the ones that suffered during the accident. And what you see is, in essence, a lot of construction work. So on this picture here is Unit 2. Unit 2, interestingly, hasn't suffered a hydrogen explosion, most likely by the fact that its external structure was damaged by the explosion. Unit 1, and a panel got blown off. So the hydrogen had a chance to vent itself before it accumulated and exploded inside of the containment building, like it did for all the other reactors. Reactor number 4 already has a structure covering up the spent nuclear fuel pools up top, and is also along with the Unit 3 in the best state when it comes to decontamination and the removal of nuclear fuel. Unit 1 is the most difficult one. It's not only the oldest one at the plant, and it had a reputation among the employees of being a bit tricky to operate. It's the only one built by the Americans. Then Unit 2, 3, and 4 were built on a license by a Japanese company. If I recall correctly, Toshiba and Mitsubishi were involved in the construction of those units, but that's just a small side fact that doesn't have a lot of influence over the course of events. Now, back to the matter at hand. So you stand 80 meters away, around 80 meters from these units, and closest to you is Unit 1. And you have a guy explaining to you what the state of each and every one of those reactors is. And while he is doing that, all of our personal dosimeters, when we are on site, started going up one after the other. So you'll be getting a lot of these noises, and they're extremely alarming noises. It's a very high-pitched whine coming out of this little device that you have in the neck, essentially telling you that you have already exceeded your allowed dosage, the one that was set. Again, it's a very low value, so nothing to be worried about. And then you stand there for around 15 minutes and you get a very good explanation of the state of all of these reactors. And this explanation is very much tied to this. So TEPCO was very kind to provide us with a whole guidebook of what's happening at Fukushima Daiichi. And we were told how many fuel rods remain in every single one of the reactors, approximately, or what the state of contamination and decommissioning is. And as you see, again, in this page, as I said, Unit 3 is absolutely in the best condition. All of the fuel rods that were in there from the spent fuel pool, which was the highest floor, are removed at the moment. So it's the reactor that is in the safest state. Needless to say, Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 4 are in a far worse shape. Unit 1, again, most likely the worst of them all. And we now know, after all these years, that these units have suffered at least partial, but still very major nuclear meltdowns. So the fuel has seeped through the primary containment vessel into the basements of the buildings. It is submerged, still needs cooling as it's still reactive, obviously, after all these years. It will be for many, many more. And well, there is no clear plan in sight for what to do with them. So after you spend those 15 minutes at this site looking at these reactors and just taking in the fact that at less than 14 years after the accident, you can stand next to these reactors not worrying about the fact that you will be contaminated and irradiated after your visit is something to have a good thought about how much the decontamination effort has brought to the region. It's safe to stand there, so it's more than likely that it will be safe to live around the plant in a couple of years' time. So just take that in. Human power is effectively limitless, even in face of great disaster. So after that, after you get that view in your head, and also after you spot the fact that the administrative building next to Unit 1 is still standing, and you can see that the tsunami first wrecked it from one side, and then the hydrogen explosions blew the windows in from the other side. That was something that, you just look at it and you see the power of the things of nature, first of all, and then industrial disaster, that what power it actually holds. It's stunning, really, to just know how much trouble something like this can cause. But I digress. After that, you leave, and the bus will take you around on a short tour. First of all, the place that they took us are Units 5 and 6. So many people don't know that these units exist. You probably have seen them on my drone footage. They're the two closest ones to the drone in the view, so they're the ones in the forefront of the picture. Now, Units 5 and 6 were not at all influenced by the disaster. First of all, because they have been shut down for regular maintenance at the moment of the disaster, so there was no live nuclear reaction going on in them. So that's why they haven't suffered any accidents. And second of all, they also have been the newest, built in a slightly different way at a bit of a higher level in comparison to Units 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's why they probably have been left untouched. And Units 5 and 6 serve as a good example of how Fukushima Daiichi has looked before the accident, because first of all, they still have their original coat of paint, which is interestingly enough starting to peel away after all these years. But again, they're just left untouched, so you have a chance to see how the plant looked before then. Also from Units 5 and 6, you get to see the flood walls, the ones that failed to stop the tsunami, which was way higher than the projected value at which they were built from the tsunami that were built to defend. And you also get the idea of the actual power of the tsunami when you see everything that has wrecked along the way. Of course, most of the things have been removed by now, but again, some are still left lingering, and you just see that big metal objects which is moved tens of meters away by a wave, just telling you how powerful it really was. After Units 5 and 6, the rest of the trip focuses on showing you a system called the Alps Treatment Center. So Alps treatment is a way, an innovative way of treating water at Fukushima Daiichi. And it's the one that you probably have heard about if you know anything about the topic recently, because there has been a lot of controversy about the fact that Fukushima Daiichi is releasing tritium water into the ocean. And now, just to give you a good idea, first of all, tritium water, as we've been told, and as far as I know personally, isn't too much of a concern. A lot of power plants, pretty much all of them, produce this kind of water in the process of making nuclear energy, because you have to realize that to make energy, It's not any magical process. It's essentially a nuclear reaction heating up water, which generates steam, and the steam later moves turbines. And these turbines and what in turn creates electricity, makes it. And then this water is circulating within the system and moving along this way in circular motion, being used over and over again to produce steam and to power the turbines. So at the end, you will be releasing treated water into the nearest water reservoir at some point in every nuclear power plant. But of course, Fukushima, and rightfully so, had a lot of scrutiny attached to it, and a lot of people are worried about what on earth is TEPCO doing now and what on earth it's releasing now. So this Alps treated water, again, has been subject to a lot of scrutiny, and we've been told that it's completely clean. It's just showing us that the whole process takes place across a huge amount of land within the nuclear power plant, so with all the filters being staged one after the other. And then it goes into big storage tanks, and the reason for the release is, well, they have no place to put additional storage tanks in, so they have to start getting rid of the water that they are treating, because again, nuclear reactors still need cooling, so all of this water that was used before, that's being used now, it has to get released eventually, and it will be released as it is being released now. The question that I asked, and you wouldn't be surprised by the answer that I'll provide you in a moment, is what on earth happens with the filters? Because Alps treatment, of course, requires a lot of filters along the way, which take out all of the radioactive isotopes along the way, essentially soak them in and let clean water through, or cleaner water through. Now, we've been shown a bottle of the water coming from the Alps treatment. One of the guys on the visit asked if he can drink it. That's obviously out of the question. The guy from TEPCO reacted with a very nice laugh when we asked that question. But the question that didn't get him laughing was mine, about what happens with these filters. Because obviously, when you use up a filter, you have to get rid of it somehow. And TEPCO doesn't have an idea what to do with it. As with pretty much every single piece of nuclear waste at the plant at the moment, it's being stored. They're just storing it, storing. Eventually, they will run out of space on site to store these things. They will have to be shipped off-site. And just like with the rubble from the villages that are being demolished, just like with the topsoil, just like with everything else at the site, and at Fukushima in the entire zone that was evacuated, things are being stored. Whatever can be incinerated will be incinerated in the end. What cannot be incinerated, well, they'll have to find a solution. And these filters are one of the things that they will have to find a solution to. After that, as I told you at the beginning, you repeat the whole ordeal of the entryway into the plant, but in reverse. You get checked for radiation, your dosimeters get collected, your high visibility vests get taken away, and you hop on a different bus and you go back to the archives, pick up your electronics, your gadgets, and get to leave with this wonderful collection of documents that TEPCO has provided, maps, and also an IAEA report about the state of the plant. So the report tells you that things are starting to go smoothly in the right direction, and you also get from the plant, I believe, all these nice leaflets in Japanese, which unfortunately I'm in no position to read, but the only thing that I did spot in it, which caught my attention, are the storage sites about which I just told you. So that's how TEPCO is getting rid of nuclear waste, not nuclear waste, irradiated leftovers from the cleanup process at the moment, storing them in various places and telling you that the radiation levels around them are pretty much safe. So that's it for the TEPCO visit. And again, TEPCO is the company responsible, at least according to the reports, for the events at Fukushima, and it's also the company responsible for the cleanup efforts, which now, in majority, is owned by the Japanese state. Now, after visiting the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the place we went to next was Futaba. And when you stay at Futaba, as you'll see in my video and here in my video, there's only one hotel. So this single hotel, it's nothing to write home about. It's a typical workers' hotel, but it's more than enough in a place like this. An interesting fact, it must be comfortable enough for me not to have felt an earthquake going through the area. We woke up in the morning when we were staying there that one night, and I recall that during the night I woke up because my phone was moving. And I thought, that it must be vibrating. Somebody's calling me because of the time difference between Poland and Japan. It turned out in the morning that there was a pretty significant earthquake in the area. I think less than 6 on the Richter scale, but still significant enough. It was my first earthquake in my life, and I've slept through it pretty much, with no injury. And people like my wife, for example, didn't even wake up. And other people on the visit said that, yeah, we felt something, but we didn't know what's happening. And the person that was guiding us in Fukushima, she was visibly scared of what has happened. So, there was an earthquake that we just slept through in Fukushima, 5 kilometers away from the plant. So, welcome to the reality of seismic activity in Japan. Now, but back to Futaba. So Futaba has been reopened just in 2022. And first of all, you can feel that because it was a town of 7,000 people, as I said, we'll say in the video. Right now, only around 100 people live there. I sound like a broken record, probably repeating that Call of Duty quote that everybody knows about Pripyat. 40,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town. Well, it's a nuclear ghost town. It's exactly what it is. And the cleanup at Futaba is going smoothly. And as I'll show you probably now in the background, a lot of demolition work is still taking place. So the authorities have given people a choice. If you used to live in the area around the nuclear power plant, this applies to all of it, not only Futaba. You can either get a government grant to clean up the building, which is, according to a guide, I might misspeak here, but around $9,000 to just decontaminate the outside of a normal-sized house. That's what we've been told by the person that's living there. So the government gives you a small grant to get rid of that problem. But after that, you're essentially left on your own, and you settle in a place that doesn't have too many services. And the other option is to get your house demolished, and the government is taking care of that. You'll see a lot of dump trucks around Futaba just taking away things, leftovers from these demolition works. We walked around all of Futaba. We used our Terra 1 personal dosimeters, laid them on the ground, and you can see that the cleanup effort was focused on getting rid of the radioactive topsoil because the radiation levels are, really, really low. In essence, nothing that is dangerous, and actually many places cleaner than all around Tokyo. So that shows how good of an effort TEPCO was putting into the cleanup. But again, the town is slowly disappearing, but you still see places that remind you of 2011. We've run into, first of all, a dealership of Subaru, and you will see commercial still posters already losing their color, obviously, after being left out in the sun for years. Still telling you that the 2011 Forester is up for sale. And there is a car in the back, a small K-car Subaru, which was probably brought in for service, and it was just left in this condition. It's, of course, full of dust, which probably would be the dangerous bit, because dust tends to accumulate a lot of radioactive isotopes, so not touching it is not a good idea. Actually entering these places is not a good idea, not only for radiation-related topics, but you have to keep in mind that this is private property, first of all, so you're trespassing, and second of all, people used to live here, and it is probably more respectful not to enter these places. There has been a lot of suffering tied to Fukushima, and it commands respect. Now, when at Futaba, we went to see the Futaba Choritsu Futabashu High School, which was the largest in the region. Unfortunately, they're tearing it down. Like I said, most of the city is being demolished, and then even that high school will not stand to this test of time. But you'll see a lot of places like the youth center, the aquatics center, the youth maternity center, and a lot of the central part of the city, realistically, still left untouched. Again, radiation levels are safe, but what amazes me is that you'll see bikes still standing unlocked. There's no chain locking into things in front of these buildings all these years later. They're already becoming overgrown, obviously, with weeds and with all the greenery around them. They're just still left there, and it speaks a lot to the culture of Japan. First of all, stealing is disgraceful, and that's one of the reasons why they have never disappeared. Not to say that there wasn't looting in the area, as there was. We've been told specifically that a new electronics store was supposed to open, and after the tsunami, it was raided by shoplifters because of the lack of control in the area. But I digress. Back to Futaba. You'll see that these places still stand. Eventually, they will be torn down to make way for new people to come and live there. Again, around 100 people live in Futaba at the moment. There isn't really a lot of reasons to live there because there isn't much in terms of service. There's one convenience store. There is one new post office, which was something that we were told is a sign of normality. And there's also an upcoming laundromat at a train station. And that's realistically it. For anything else, you have to commute outside of Futaba. And you probably will have to commute outside of it for years to come. Futaba is a sombering site. It's a ghost town in the middle of Japan, on its largest island, close to Tokyo, or else 3.5 hours away. But driving, it's a sight to behold, really. And not only Futaba, but all the cities around it that we've seen. We've been to places which have seen better recovery because they're further away from the power plant. Towns which have their own Pokemon figures, just dead smack in the middle of them, because you can have it. Life has returned. The area around the plant still as dead as it can be, but the area further away, you wouldn't really even tell today if you didn't see these movable gates still locking away many places like pachinko parlors or shops along the way to Fukushima. But again, it's slowly returning to life, and it's a testament of how much we can achieve as a human race if we unite against the common enemy. Unfortunately, this common enemy, once again in history after Chernobyl, has been nuclear energy. And as I said at the very beginning of this short documentary, Japan has been hit the hardest by nuclear energy, essentially the atom in any conceivable way. First with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, and now with Fukushima Daiichi. But despite all of that, it's aiming to reopen its nuclear power plants with a significant shift to renewables wherever it can. But in a place with limited resources, nuclear energy still stays as the most prominent source of electricity, which all of us need to live, and which Japan needs to let the largest city on Earth, Tokyo, live. So that will be it from me. The rest I hope you've seen in the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this short account of a visit to Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in 2024.